The reason why we're reminding you of YouTube, there is no limit. And those of you who are watching on YouTube, you need to realize also that you may not realize this. For instance, there's going to be some individuals that are watching this broadcast. You're not watching it now. I'm talking to you for later. You will end up going to YouTube and you will watch this later. But you don't realize that you could be watching with us right now live. Now, I do have a hard time getting that over to people. And what happens is we are on a television station. We are simulcasting. Like right now, while we're on television, we are in fact simulcasting straight to YouTube. You would be seeing us live. Now, if you're watching on your phone, on your YouTube on your phone, there'll be a little bit of a lag, like it could be as much as 15 seconds. I'm going to turn mine on, and it sounds like I am right on the money. So you can see there that I'm same vest. This is me. This is live. This is right now. And I'm also at a TV station. So a lot of people talk to me and they say, Johnny, we wish we could see you live. What channel are you on? Well, you cannot pick up this channel that I'm on. This is a Virginia television station. But you could watch YouTube. You and your friends could watch YouTube while this program is going. You could call in and participate, even though I don't particularly like a lot of calls when I'm doing a Genesis class, but nevertheless, you could be watching as we are doing the show. So this is important then. All of a sudden, it becomes extremely important that you know when the times are, because you could be watching anytime. My email address is joeblue81@gmail.com. Very simple, Joe Blue. Joe Blue is one of the old-time preachers in the Arkansas Angel book that we give away. I sent out a box of 100 of those just the other day. joeblue81@gmail.com. Now, here's the point. As the Bible say, comes on Sundays at 9 p.m., Wednesdays at 9 p.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m. Yes, you can watch each one of these live. You cannot find it on a television station, but you can actually go to our YouTube, which is type in Johnny Robertson. Don't type in what does the Bible say. Type in Johnny Robertson. I'm the first Johnny Robertson that will come up in your YouTube list, and you will actually see that we are on live. There will be there will be a purple screen like this, and it will say that we're live. And if you tune in a little bit before the time, like a little bit before 9 p.m., it'll just be what we call this bumper. It's getting ready for TV. So it will then come on live. You will see the phone calls live. On Wednesday night, I do live. And on Thursday nights, Caleb does lives. They're all brand new shows. These are not reruns. For the most part, we are doing live every week, 28 hours of live television each month. And so there is no reason for you not to be able to participate with us live. And I know this is a learning process for you, but this is something that's, it can be extremely encouraging. You would end up getting 5 shows a week. You would get 5 Bible lessons a week. You would get 2 hours with me on Tuesday in Genesis. I'm just about through with Genesis. You get 2 hours in the morning, 10 a.m. with Caleb. He's doing the life of Christ from a geographical standpoint. You'll learn so much that it's just unbelievable. Then on Wednesday night, I will be doing a live broadcast that has to do with denominationalism, things that go on. Caleb this week on Thursday will be doing a great show on casinos. You don't want to miss that. Make sure you tune in to YouTube at 8 p.m. Eastern, and you would be able to see this information. Now, this morning, I have just a lot of things that I want to cover in Genesis. We are way over in Genesis now. Last week, we got as far as, I'm pretty sure we were in Genesis 42, 46 by the time it was all said and done. And we're covering a lot of information. We're going to cover a lot of information today, and it's going to be information that I think that you're going to be extremely interested in. And I want to do a little bit of kind of what I call putting you in the story. And it's so important, y'all, that we realize that we're not studying in a fashion that completely allows us to get all of the good out of the book of Genesis. One of the things that a person needs to realize is that we generally pass over a lot of information in the early part of Jacob's life and Jacob's marriage and things of that nature. And you might say, well, Johnny, I was with you the whole time. Well, you were, but the thing is I wasn't covering all of the things that I need to cover or I could cover. And it really is, in my opinion, I wish we were doing this in a different way so that I could spend 2 or 3 days a week with you in unison, so that everybody would get a chance to keep this stuff very close in your mind. And so this morning, I want to talk to you just a little bit about how useful this information can be, and you may not even have realized how useful. I'm going to start with Genesis 37, and I know that we did this last week, but I'm going to start a different way today. Make sure that my information is as high as big as it can be, so that we're not missing anything. And I don't know, you can't see what all I got going on up here, but this morning I'm not feeling that well, and so I'm going to sit from time to time. Let me move my Bible program over and allow you to participate in what's going on. So let me just make sure that I have my screen up the way it's supposed to be. Here we go with our Bible program. Now, in Genesis 37, verse 2. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wife, and Joseph brought unto his fathers their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Joseph dreamed a dream. Verse 4. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him the more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Now, my brethren, this is a segment where I don't know any other way to say this. It's a segment that we're not all that familiar with, and it's because it doesn't seem like it is something of like extreme value when you start thinking about the fact that he is with, that Joseph is with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And so let's go back and let's talk about this just for a little bit. Leah, this is in Genesis 29, and I promise you this is going to resonate with you once you start getting it. Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. Now, y'all, Leah is the wife that Jacob didn't want. Rachel is the wife that Jacob wanted. So you have to start out in this relationship, and you have to start out realizing there's some inner anxieties, there's some inner resentment, there's some inner bitterness, there's some difficulties here. And what we're actually talking about when we get into this and look into this is, this is teaching for us and our families. Well, you might say, and rightly so, hope it isn't the case, you might say, well, I'm not going to have to be involved with my dad and another woman. and her children. Well, I think you're not thinking as broad as you might need to think, and you surely are not thinking about people at large, because pretty much everybody around us is divorcing and remarrying. Every marriage, all the marriages out there now, basically 1 out of 2 ends up in divorce. So usually somebody's going to marry somebody else. Probably in your family, it's the same way. My dad married someone else. I had to have a relationship with the woman that he married. My mom remarried. I had to have a relationship with the man that she married. And so you might not realize that this is information that is key. You wouldn't want to practice some of it you would. But watch how this goes. So Reuben is the firstborn. And she conceived again. And this time she conceives Simeon. You do need to remember whose mom is whom. So you've got Reuben and Simeon. She bare again, and she named bare Levi, and she bare again, and she bare Judah. So you've got the first 4 children of Leah, and she's the unloved wife. So basically she has these children. She has Reuben, she has Simeon, she has Levi, and she has Judah. Naturally, these 4 are going to have a relationship that is going to be somewhat different because they are of the same mother. But let's move to the next chapter, and that is chapter 30, verse 4. In chapter 30, verse 4, I want you to notice then what takes place. So, let's back up just a little bit. This is basically Jacob's anger being aggravated at Rachel because he cannot have children, and she's upset because Leah's having all the children, and her womb is barren. Rachel's womb is barren. And here's what Rachel does. She said, "Behold, my maid, go in unto her, my knee, and that I may have children by her." Now, y'all, here's the part that we are not putting into play here. Bilhah is a present. If you get down to it, she is a present. You might say, well, I see that. No, you don't. I'm not talking about a present to Jacob. Bilhah is a present from Laban, who is Rachel's daddy. Rachel's daddy is Laban, and Laban's sister is Rebekah, the wife of Isaac. Therefore, Rachel is the niece of Rebekah. So Rachel is the wife that he loved. Laban, her daddy, gives her a present. What is it? He gives her a maid. That's a present. She is actually a handmaid. She is a servant. Now, maybe it's the case that you're still not putting this into play. Let me see if I can keep my continuity here. I'm going to open up another another set of scriptures. I always try to keep from losing what I had. Let's go to Genesis chapter 21. And I don't have all of these memorized, but notice this. Sarah conceived and bare a son in her old age, and at the set time of which God had spoken to him, and Abraham called his name, his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare, Isaac. Now, Abraham circumcised Isaac on the 8th day. We're just skimming here. Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And so Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Now, you should be able at this moment to see where I was going. Hagar is a handmaid. She is a servant. Bilhah is a servant. The servant, Hagar, has born a child named Ishmael. And what happens? When Sarah gets upset with Ishmael and with Hagar, she gets rid of them. Wherefore she said to Abraham, cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. So, are you getting this? What is actually taking place is that's just one instance in Genesis 21. That's just one instance. They have one handmaid, and she bears a child, and you hear how the child is looked upon. He's the child of a bondwoman. Now, Abraham loves him. It was a long time before they had Isaac, and Abraham loved Ishmael. But it still is the case that she was the bondwoman. She was the servant to Sarah. Okay, so here's what you now have. You have these 4 children who are actually children of Leah. You have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. They have a certain relationship themselves with each other. And then in the same time frame here, Bilhah is watching this. It's not like she waited until all these children were born and then said, I need to have a child. And she basically makes Jacob upset with that. This is something that could be concurrent. It could be after the second birth. It could be after Simeon is born. I don't know, but I know she said, here's, behold, my handmaid Bilhah, go in unto her. Now, this is a present that her father, Rachel's father, gave her, a handmaid, a bondwoman, to help take care of her children. Well, what happens? Well, Bilhah ends up conceiving, and she bears Jacob a son. And the name of this son is Dan. Now, when we started out a moment ago, Joseph had been sent out to check on the sons. 37:2. Now, when you read that in Genesis 37:2, if you had not processed all this back here, you didn't know who it was that Joseph was reporting on. So basically, Joseph is reporting on Dan, and Bilhah has another child. His name is Naphtali. So Joseph is sent out by Jacob to see how these boys are doing. These are the sons of a bondwoman. Now, they are older than Joseph. It was quite some time before Rachel finally had her own child, Joseph. So these boys are growing up at the same time with Leah's children. But remember, this is not Leah's handmaid. This is Rachel's handmaid. And so basically, Rachel's handmaid, her servant, is raising up these children, and Rachel is also involved. She says that, she actually says that she will bear them on her knee. So she's going to treat them pretty much. Right here, she shall bear upon my knees that I may also have children by her. There's going to be a special relationship between Rachel and Bilhah's children, but still they are children that are from Jacob, and they're not her children. So they're going to have a different relationship to Jacob than the children of Leah, because Leah is really his wife. So you've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, and then you have a tier down. You drop down now to basically what really ends up being the nanny, the servant, and she's having children, and they're going to be different in rank than the other children. All right, let's keep this up. So Rachel said, with great wrestling have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali. Now, Rachel didn't have this son. Bilhah did. But Rachel is counting it as sons that are going to be in her tent. And all of this is going to be going on. All right, now look what Zilpah did, or Leah did. So Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, and she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob to wife. Okay, who is Zilpah? Zilpah also is a present. She is a present from Laban. What does that mean? Laban gave Zilpah handmaid too. And she is literally to serve Leah and to help with the children. So now Leah is letting Jacob have her to be wife or concubine, and guess what? Well, she bare, and the child's name is Gad. So now Leah has her 4, and she has a child that she's going to be counting to a certain degree, her own, but his name is Gad. And then it happens again. She bare a second son. So you've got Dan and Naphtali. Now you have Gad and Asher. So here you go. Now what you need to realize now is that Joseph was reporting on Gad and Asher, Dan and Naphtali. Now, just hold on a minute. One of the things you have to realize, that we all have to realize, is we have to realize that these people are kin. Leah and Rachel are sisters. They are both the nieces of Rebekah. Instead of that being their mother-in-law, just their mother-in-law, Rebekah, the wife of Isaac, Rebekah's not just their mother-in-law, by the way, which they've never met, but she is, in fact, they are nieces to her. Now, I'll take the part about they've never met. They might have met. I don't know if they were alive as little children when Abraham sent his servant up to Padan Aram to get Rebekah from Nahor, which is basically the brother of Abraham. I don't know if those kids were already alive or not, but that's been a long time, 40 years, so probably not, maybe, I don't know. But don't lose me here. What you need to realize is Leah, Rachel, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, Laban, they're all kin. They're uncles and cousins and brothers. Now, these handmaids are not. They are not the same nationality. That's what you need to pick up from Hagar in Genesis 21. These bond people are not actually the kinfolk. They are individuals for whatever purpose in the land where Laban is, in Padan Aram, in Haran. For whatever reason, they may have come across hard times. They may have had a daddy that sold them. This is the very common custom. So what we're saying is they are not of the same nationality. What does that mean? It means that these children, Asher and Dan and Gad and Naphtali, they don't have the same features as the other children. They're not exactly the same level. Now, I'm not saying any of this matters as far as an Israelite. What matters here is how you process what takes place in this family. So now you've got 4 kids that are concurrent. They're actually all being brought up at the same time, but they are not the same. One group is actually real children of Jacob and his real wife. The other 4 are from Jacob, and they are from handmaidens, servants, nannies of his 2 wives. And Bilhah is basically the servant or the nanny of his favorite wife. And so also later on, Bilhah will be Joseph's nanny as well, because when Joseph comes along and be born, Bilhah is the servant, the handmaid of Rachel. So you have a dynamic going on here, and you have some questions that have to be answered when you start talking about they hated him. Are we ready to go back? Genesis 37. Let's go back now. Genesis 37, verse 1. Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Now, he brings his father an evil report on whatever it is they're doing. Now, here's the thing. They are basically half brothers in a sense of their daddy being all the same. But the thing is, they are not related at all to Laban, or they're not related to Rachel in the sense that they are like really brothers to her children in her mind. I'm saying these are children of the handmaids, the nannies. And so they serve and take care of these children in the home. Now, let me add another scripture basically to set forth relationships. Now, can you imagine? Joseph is the real son. He is the finally, Rachel has a child named Joseph. He is the child of Jacob's old age. Jacob was 40 years old when he went up to Padan Aram in the first place, and he spent 7 years working for Rachel, and he gets Leah. He has to spend 7 more years, and these children are being born. And Joseph is not being born in that time frame. But I want you to notice this when we talk about relationships. Galatians chapter 4, 1. Now, this is not actually in this context. This context is about something else, but it contains truth that applies back here. Now, some of these individuals are real sons of Jacob. Some of them are sons of Jacob through another nationality. For instance, Ishmael is half Egyptian. Where does Ishmael go when he is put out by Jacob as a result of, in Genesis 21, as a result of Sarah becoming upset in the way he's treating Isaac? They go to Egypt. He's half Egyptian. These, I don't know what Bilhah and Zilpah nationality is. I just know they're not the same as Jacob, Rachel, Laban, Isaac, Rebekah. They're not the same nationality. So they're half Jacob's sons, but they're half of another nationality. Well, what difference does that make? Here it is. In Galatians 4:1, Paul says, "Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all." Do you not realize that? When you're a child, when little kids are little kids, and your mother is, and your daddy is Leah and Jacob, but Leah's handmaid, Zilpah, has had you, and so you're in the house with all of them when you're little. And one of the reasons that Leah is having Zilpah have more children, she actually has Zilpah have children after she has quit having children, is she is continually trying to win favor from Jacob. So all of these kids, while they're kids, they are basically, it's just the way it is. Kids, they don't know the difference. Maybe when you were a little kid, and I was a little kid, we played with all kinds of different nationalities. I lived in Texas with a lot of Mexican kids were moving in during those time frames as they learned to speak Spanish. Mexican kids, the black kids, the white kids, all of us played together. We were just kids. Now, surely there were some bullies and there were some individuals, parents who were super racist, and they would try to interject their hatred and dislike and their jokes and stuff like that. But that wasn't the norm when we were little kids. What are we building at here? We're building at the fact that these boys are raised up together. But you have to realize that Joseph is not raised up at the same time. He comes along, and they all know there's a difference between Asher, there's a difference between Dan, Naphtali, and Gad. What do you mean? Well, they're not the same nationality, but they grew up at the same time with Leah's children. But Joseph comes along, and he is totally different because he is the son of the loved wife. But there is one thing about him that would be somewhat interesting, and that is Bilhah would be his nanny. So she would be the servant that took care of him. Now, what does that have to do with anything? These 4 boys that are not of the same nationality, they are out with the flocks of Jacob, and Joseph is sent out to have a look. He gives an evil report on them. They already don't like him. They already hate him because he has this very special relationship with their daddy that they love. But their relationship is so different than Joseph's, and their relationship as they grow up is going to be different than Reuben. It's going to be different than Simeon and Levi and Judah. And so, then you add in, do we want to add in? I'm going to have to guess Genesis 35. Genesis 35. 22. And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went in and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. Now, when you hear that the sons of Jacob were 12, this isn't just, okay, well, there's just those 12. No, you are supposed to be keeping up with these people. You're supposed to be realizing that there is a dynamic here that's going on. You might say, well, how can I possibly use this? You know any dysfunctional families? What do you mean dysfunctional families? Well, do you know anybody? Let's just say, for instance, do you have a sister who has married and divorced and then remarried, and she's dealing with her new husband, but she's got the old husband, and he marries another wife, and they've got children on both sides, and so all these children are now mixing and mingling together? And you might come over and say, help me. Caleb uses Ted. Ted, help me. Well, where would you send them? You might say, you need a psychologist. No, you need to read the Bible. This information is right here. These problems that arise as a result of these differing individuals who do not have the same parents in the same way, but they all want the same love and attention and to be appreciated, is all right here. And we are just touching the hem of the garment. So what did we just say? Reuben has gone in and slept with Joseph's nanny. So you see how this is going? And Reuben is the firstborn. He is actually the heir. He gets a double portion. And now he does this to his father's fourth wife, or concubine, or his father, Rachel's servant. He is not a child of Rachel himself. He's a child of Leah, the less loved. And so this is it. And there's more than this. I don't have time to go into all of that, but you see how this is going. Now let's go back to Genesis chapter 37, verse 1, and let's start over one more time. Genesis 37, verse 1, and let's get all that's in here. I'm doing something wrong. Give me a second. Genesis 37. And I meant to start with 1 again. Y'all bear with me. We're going to get somewhere. All right. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Doing better. Let me take a drink here. All right. Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wife, Dan, Asher, Naphtali, and Gad, and he brought an evil report on those 4 sons. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his others, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. Now look at this. They could not speak peaceably unto him. I am telling you, these are things that you need to be able to put into some kind of package so that you can use them later with people and say, look, let's just say a woman is having this problem with children, part of the children, because of the marriage that we just talked about, the different kinds of marriages. And you're trying to convince the woman, you're trying to convince your sister, let's say, that she really ought to take into her thinking process that she's not the only one that's ever gone through this. And you know, that's really why we have these wonderful things in the Bible. You get to go over there and you get to read it, and you could say to yourself, well, you know what? At least I don't have it this bad. And you know what? I think I'm going to read this and see what's in it that would be able to help me to see the stuff that is going on and maybe manage my life and my thinking process in such a way that I don't allow myself to be used as a device of the devil. This is fantastic material. And every one of us have extended families, and every one of us have all these kinds of things going on as a result of divorce and remarriage. They had this going on because they were marrying more than one person. Isaac did not. Isaac only had one wife, Rebekah. But his two sons, they've got multiple wives, and we're seeing all this play out, and it is a wonder. Joseph then dreams a dream and told it to his brethren. Now, we all know this. He knew he was actually being told ahead of time that something was going to happen in his life that was going to involve his brothers and his parents being subservient. So his brethren said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. Now, for one thing, Reuben is the heir. Well, if you were over in Genesis 48, you would learn at the end of the book that Reuben lost that place because he lay with Bilhah, which is the nanny to Joseph, the servant to Rachel. And so he forfeited his birthright. Now, and the brethren said unto him, Shall you reign over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams. He dreamed another dream, and it's basically the same thing, except it involves the mother and the daddy. And his brethren went to feed the father's flock in Shechem, and Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee. And he said unto him, Here am I. So he said, Go, pray, I pray thee, see whether it is well with them, with the brethren, with all the flocks, and bring me word again. He's going to be bringing a report. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and when he was wandering in a field, the man asked him, saying, What seek ye? And he said, I seek my brethren, tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed from hence. I heard them say they were going to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Now, everybody in this situation is not the same. What do you mean by that? Well, probably when you read this generally, you didn't take into account 4 of these brothers are not even the same nationality as their other 4 brethren, because they are born from bondwomen who are not kin to Laban. They are, for some reason or other, I don't know all the circumstances, how individuals find themselves in bondage, find themselves not being free, but it's all over. I mean, you see the end of this, Joseph is going to be sold to the Ishmaelites. But you know this, you have 4 brothers that hate him even more. Early on, it just said they couldn't even speak peaceably to him. Now, these other brothers, they would have grown up together pretty much. They're being born right after the other. Leah's 4, they're born. Rachel doesn't have any children, but her handmaid bears her 2 children, and Leah's handmaid bears her 2 children. Galatians 4, when you're a child, you're no different, the heir is no different than the servant. They're all growing up. They have a relationship that they sustain together, and it's different. You've got 4 of them. They absolutely hate Joseph. The other 4, which would be Leah's sons, I don't know the relationship they sustain, but I do know it is different, because you come right here and you end up hearing Reuben heard what they said. Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, Let's not kill him. Now, why did he do that? It's a different relationship, not to mention the fact that he hasn't lain with Bilhah yet. He is still in a position to be the heir. He has the birthright, and he's responsible for things as the older brother. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into a pit that is in the wilderness, lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to their father again. So you see all this is going on? And it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, they stripped his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him in the pit. The pit was empty, and they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Israelites came from Gilead with their camels. And Judah said to the brethren, What profit is it to slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. Now you see, he is in fact related to Judah in a different way than he is to Dan, Asher, Naphtali, and Gad. They are further along a different family trajectory. Let's just say if they were like Ishmael, they're half Egyptians. I doubt very seriously that they're Egyptians. Haran is over near Babylonia, Ur of the Chaldees, so they could have been any number of those kinds of relations. But that is important. Now, another thing that I'd like to at least deal with as we are going through this is when we handle each other, y'all, these are just points that you pick up. When we handle each other, or when we're like a church, or we're dealing with a sister church over here and another congregation over here or whatever, and we hear of something that takes place with an individual, Reuben went in and lay with his father's concubine. Basically, I'm talking to people in the Church of Christ, and this happens outside too. I'm saying, look at Jerry Falwell Jr., he's just toast. Now, Reuben, if people in the brotherhood were in charge of this story, if they were the managing hand instead of God, Reuben would be toast. Okay, Reuben's out the story. He's not going to be involved in anything else. He's gone. See how that goes? The story is being narrated to the children of Israel. They are individuals who have been in bondage for 4 generations over in Egypt. They're hearing the in detail, in order story of their relatives. And they are all kin in a way, some way or another, they're kin to Reuben. 4 of those boys are kin to Reuben in a very different way. Joseph and Benjamin would be kin to Reuben in another way. And then the 4 sons that come from the servants, they are kin in another way. So these relationships are not all the same. But nevertheless, I'm just saying, if you were in charge, would you have just said toast? All right, let me move to Genesis 38. Now, Genesis 38 is just, man, if you get down to it, you're studying along here about Joseph, and you see him be sold into to the Ishmaelites, the Midianites, and the next thing you see, he's over in Egypt, and he's belonging to Potiphar now. So, but you didn't get all that. Genesis 37 is just it's narrative of what takes place. These brothers having problems with their other brother who is loved by their father. And you have to remind yourself from now on, it's not just because he was partial to this child. This child had a different relationship as far as mothers are concerned. These other boys are half nationality. They're not even the same relationship. Their mothers are servants. They could be Chaldean, they could be Babylonian, but they are half something, where these others are all of the same family line. And so how in the world would you not have problems in a family when you've got stepchildren and things of that nature? But watch this. It came to pass that Judah went down with his brethren, and he turned into a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hiram, and Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her and he went in unto her. So basically, he marries a Canaanite. He has a son named and Onan, and we keep moving down the line, and now it's time for to get married. And marries Tamar. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar, and Judah's firstborn was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. Now, when this happens, the other brother is supposed to bring up seed to his brother's name. This is a general principle. These individuals marry the dead. When the brother dies, the wife marries one of the other brothers. There's plenty of countries that still do this. It's a custom that has to do with posterity and bringing up someone to work the particular land that they have and the flocks that they have. And so he would not, Onan would not, but let's just move along as we go. We get down to the fact that Onan dies too, and Judah promises Tamar that when the baby son, Shelah, is grown, he will let her be married to him. Well, he didn't keep his promise. And so she basically, at some point, puts off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the Timnath, for she saw that Shelah was grown and was not given unto him for wife. And he turned unto her by the way and said, Go to, I pray thee, let me come in, for he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what wilt thou give me that thou mayest come in? He said, I'll give thee a kid from the flock. And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? So basically he gives her his staff and his signet ring and bracelets. And so what you basically have is you have Judah, one of the sons of Leah, also a brother to Reuben. Reuben's gone in and laid with somebody that wasn't his wife, his daddy's wife, really. I don't know really what the relationship would be when your mother and her sister are married to the same daddy. I'll let you work that out. But nevertheless, that's what he did. What I said, likely we would say, okay, he's toast. Remove him from this story. That particular element of time is going to be the judgment for all time for Reuben. Well, here's Judah. He goes into a harlot, and the harlot ends up being not really a harlot. She ends up being his own daughter-in-law. And that is a whole chapter that is narrated in this story. And it has a significant point. We're not going to spend the time with it right now. But what I'm saying is, what would you have done? I'm saying, members of the church, would you take this point in time and just say, okay, that's it, toast. Judah is toast. That's it. There's no redeeming Judah. Really? It's a good thing you're not God. Because what actually happens in the mind of God, if you really pay attention, in the mind of God, we are not judged on a particular act and we're toast. That is a point in your life, and we're judged on the totality of all of our actions, our perseverance, and our determination to try to get back on the right track as we go along. But I'm just pointing this out. As you went through, there'd be no more Reuben in the story. There would be no more Judah in this story. And basically, we would just move on into the rest of the story. So, I hope that you do get something out of all of that when we started talking about the fact that these people are not the same nationality and they don't sustain the same relationship with each other, and that can be very, very helpful. So at this point, we need to move on. We already had covered the majority of that story, of that account, and we had actually gotten to the point of Genesis 40, where we were basically seeing Joseph in prison, and then we had seen Joseph. This is chapter 41. And so here's what I want to do at this point. I want us to start picking up on something that I really don't think that individuals realize. Now, last week, y'all, we had a word, and the word was accommodated. We were talking about the fact that we need to be accommodating people. Now, we got some guys in the studio here, and I basically am friends with all of them. Other preachers that come in, through the years, 20 years, I've heard all kinds of different stories about the other preachers and the way they treat the individuals that are in the studio and that work with us. You know what? I want people to help me out. I need help at different times with programs. I need help with new material. This is a new computer that I'm working with right now. We have all kinds of difficulties associated with getting these messages out onto the air and then getting them up into YouTube. Now, if I'm up in here being a jerk, like for instance, you misspell my name and I just flip out because you misspell my name or something like that, and I'm giving you a real instance. There's one particular pastor that it is ridiculous how bad he was about stuff like that. He wanted, you see these little things I'm messing with right now? He wanted these banners to be exactly, and they were off just an inch, like just even a quarter of an inch. Oh man, he gave them the blues, and they would tell me, what are we talking about? Folks, we can't be that way. If we're going to get along in this world, we have to be accommodating. What does that have to do with this? Joseph has learned. He has gone from being a privileged young 17-year-old who was his daddy's favorite, who was able to go in and out with his brothers. He gave reports on them about things they were doing. I don't know what all they were doing, but I know that at a sheep shearing, Judah goes in and has sex with a woman on the side of the road. Reuben is over here having sex with Joseph's nanny, Bilhah, which is the servant, the second, third, or fourth wife of Jacob, his dad. So we're talking about giving an evil report. I have no idea what these guys are doing. But I do know that Joseph is privileged, and then he finds himself losing all that privilege, and he becomes a bondservant himself. But in last week's lesson, we noticed that he continued to prosper. Now, the Bible says that God was with him, and he prospered. But, you know, someone might say, well, that's miraculous stuff. Is it really miraculous stuff? Doesn't the Bible tell us that we should actually we should pray for our daily bread? And some individuals say, well, we just work for our daily bread. We pray for our daily bread and manna comes down. That's not how it works. God is blessing us. He tells us to pray for what we need, but we have to go out and work. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. If you're not working, you don't eat. See how that goes? And so even though the Bible does say that God was with Joseph, Joseph was learning how to be accommodative. He was accommodating to Potiphar, to the point that Potiphar didn't know anything that was going on in his house except for food. Now, when you say, well, what about the food? Egyptians had a certain food that they ate, just like Jews later had a food that they ate. It is an abomination for them to eat certain foods, and it's an abomination for certain individuals to touch their food. So other than the food, Potiphar did not know anything that was going on in his house. Joseph had endeared himself. He found grace in his sight, favor. You need favor. You need grace. You have to be that kind of person who is accommodated. And when you are that kind of person, persons want to do everything for you. They want to make sure that you're well. Why? Because you're accommodative. You're willing to do for them. You're willing to listen to their problems. If they're having trouble, let's say, for instance, you're in a particular store and you're buying an expensive computer, and individuals in there are trying to get you to buy it, but at the same time, they're not being very accommodative to you. Well, what do? You get mad and pitch a fit? That's not going to get you anywhere. So I don't want to belabor this point because we went through this last week. So here we are. Joseph is now 30 years old. He's been 13 years in Egypt. Genesis 41:46. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and he went throughout all the land. Now, y'all, what we were discussing last week is the actual word Joseph has been doing all along, and that word is discretion, and it is the same thing as being accommodative. Let me see if I can find this. Genesis 41:22. I have no idea where this is. I know it is in 41. All right. So basically, Joseph tells the meaning of the dream, and it came to pass that, and for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Okay. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this thing, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. And let him gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be stored for the land for the 7 years of famine, which shall be the land of Egypt, and the land perish not through the famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto the servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God has showed you all these things, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. So, the discretion, Proverbs 11:2, discretion will deliver you from the evil man. One of the meanings of discretion is the ability to concoct witty inventions. Now, most people stop here and they never pick up again on what actually took place. But this is not the end of what took place when we talk about the discretion of Joseph. most of the time individuals get caught up in Genesis 42. The famine went down into Canaan, and the Canaanites, Jacob and his family start coming up, and the next thing you know, you have this accommodating man, Joseph, who is now second in command, married to a very prominent individual, the priest of On. He is married to his daughter, and we pick up and then we begin to focus on the activities associated with his brothers coming into town to buy food. Now, we're going to try to do that too, but I want to make sure that you recognize that that is not the end of the story, nor is this the end of that story. Actually, what takes place, you have to skip all the way from chapter 41. You have to skip to chapter 47 in order to pick up just how discreet Joseph was. Now, you might say, man, 47, we're going to skip all of the back and forth with Jacob and his brothers. No, you don't have to skip it, but you have to realize that it's running concurrent. And it is just absolutely fabulous information. And also, let me make sure I can find this. Genesis 47, verse 20. Now, this is running at the same time as the this other is going on. I'm going to go actually drop down. I'm going to give you the whole story because you have got to see this. Now, if you start in Genesis 47, verse 8, you can see where you are in the timeline. Pharaoh has allowed Jacob to come in and stay, and Joseph is given a very important and costly portion of the land. It's called Goshen. Now, a lot of people just think, oh, boy, Pharaoh just loved him and he gave him Goshen. That is not the case. Let's notice basically what's been taking place in the meantime. Now, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, the best land, the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph nourished his father's household. Now watch this. This is verse 13. And there was no bread in all the land. Now remember, this discreet individual in chapter 41 had imposed a 20% tax on all of the goods that came in the first 7 years of the famine. So we moved from him being 30 to 37, and during that 7 years of famine, this is what Joseph did. And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So during the time frame when they're in the famine now, Joseph is basically selling the 20% that has been gathered in. He quit counting. It became so numerous, like dust on the ground. That's the corn and the meal and all the things that he had gathered. But you're getting some narrative on it now. So basically he sells this, and what does he do? He brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Now he's already saved Pharaoh by having the ability and the willingness to tell the dream. Now, how did he get to tell the dream to Pharaoh in the first place? Well, he was a very accommodative young man in that prison, and the person who was in the prison put him in charge of everybody in the prison. And when the baker and the butler came in and they were put in prison, both of them had dreams, and Joseph actually told the dreams, and he said, "Don't forget me." And the butler did forget him, but when Pharaoh had his dreams, then he said, "I remember my wrong." And he said, "There's a young man in prison that is able to interpret dreams." And so they bring him out, and he does this favor with God's ability. He tells what the dream is. So he's already endeared himself to Pharaoh, but you're not seeing it. You're not seeing the reason or the means by which he gets to put his own family in a particular part of Egypt, Ramses, and nourish and feed them in a way that is different. And when the money failed, okay, now, they have basically used their money to buy back the meal, the corn, and it's all over. They've gone down the land of Canaan. That would mean that Joseph had emissaries that would have been going down into the land of Canaan and telling them that there is meal, there's corn up here. I don't know if they delivered the corn. I know he sent wagons after Jacob. It's not in any way inconceivable that they weren't transporting some of this down into Canaan and taking the money, because it says they gathered the money out of all the land. When the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread. Why should we die in thy presence? For the money has failed. Okay, all the money has failed. Well, where is all the money? It is in Pharaoh's house now. And Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses and for the flocks and for the cattle of the herd and the asses, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. So now, when that year was ended, they came unto him the second year and said unto him, we will not hide it from you, from my Lord, how that our money is spent. My Lord also hath the herds of our cattle, there is not aught left in the sight of my Lord, but our bodies and our land. Well, what does Joseph do? Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be the servants unto Pharaoh. And he gave us seed that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them, so the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he removed them to the cities from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests bought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned to them of Pharaoh. They did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their lands. Not only did the priests have a portion, but Joseph's family had a portion too. So they're getting favorable treatment. The priests are getting favorable treatment, and Pharaoh is getting everything that the people in the land have. This man that had the ability to concoct witty inventions has simply spoiled the entire land of Egypt, and without a fight, without a fuss, and he's turned it all over to Pharaoh. Now, Joseph said unto the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the increase that you shall give the fifth part unto Pharaoh. So we're getting to the end of the famine now. But he makes a law. Once the famine is over, you give a fifth part of the proceeds, and 4 parts shall be your own for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your household, and for your little ones. And they said, thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of the Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. Joseph made a law over the land of Egypt unto this day that Pharaoh should have the fifth part, 20% tax, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph. He said unto him, if I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will deal kindly and truly with thee. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. Now, here is one other point that actually needs to be made about Joseph. Joseph also lived a good long time. It came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, behold, thy father is sick, and he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, I'm not going to look for this verse. You look for it for yourself. Joseph lived to see 3 generations of his children and grandchildren. Now, friends, when you think about the way that Israel, the children of Israel, multiplied into this tremendous nation that they become, and you open Exodus chapter 1, and the first thing that you hear is there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, or knew not the God of Joseph. What Joseph had just done, not only had he gotten himself out of prison, not only had he prophesied or told the dream of the famine and got his family into Egypt, Joseph, through his witty inventions, was able to actually set the stage for good treatment, special treatment to the children of Israel for 3 generations. And in the 4th generation is when the king arises that does not know them, recognize them. He's maybe from a totally different dynasty. I don't know any of that, but I do know this. This was a tremendous plan, and it had nothing to do with the rest of the family. Now, here's what I want you to gather from that, and we're going to go back in a moment. We're going to talk about how that Joseph actually was purified from the problems that he had. You might say, what problems did he have? Well, he was a very accommodative individual, and he was a very discretionary individual. He was a person who was discreet. He had the ability, the machinations, he had the ability, witty inventions, to come up with plans that would set things in play for 3 generations and bless them all. Now, this is what I want you to get from this. Brethren, you do not need to get yourself all up in what other people are doing and let it sidetrack you from what you could do with your discretion and God helping you, blessing you along the way. The problem that we often have is we don't see an account like this. No one recognizes that Joseph did all of this, that he set all of this in play. He basically got all of the people's money out of the land, gave it to Pharaoh. All the cattle, horses, asses, everything, gave it to Pharaoh. All the land of everybody, gave it to Pharaoh. All the people became they actually became servants, gave them to Pharaoh. And then in the land, when the land started producing again, and these individuals started planting, they then gave Pharaoh 20% tax of the things that they grew. What a tremendous blessing. What in the world could Pharaoh do to repay Joseph? There's really nothing he could do to repay Joseph. Who in the world could actually spoil an entire land, an entire country, and turn it all over to Pharaoh and make him the most powerful individual in the known world without a bow being pulled back, or we don't have a shot to fire, or anything like that? His discretion. Now here's my question. What foolishness do you allow yourself to get caught up in with other individuals and all of their problems and the things that we sometimes do, the things that we sometimes spend our life on? So let's look at a few of these things. Now, Joseph, from 30 throughout he's 30 throughout the 7 years of plenty, 37 years old, then he's 2 years into the famine. He's now 39 years old, and guess what happens? He's 39 years old, and his brothers enter into the land. And the 7 years of plenteous that was in the land of Egypt were ended. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. So he's 39 years old. He's been in Egypt 22 years. Now, I'm still driving at this point of what can happen to you and what you can fail to do if you get caught up in a bunch of garbage that has really nothing to do with the bigger picture, and it keeps your imagination on one thing, and instead of your eye being single on all the things that God could do with you if you would actually be working out His good pleasure. Let's put this in front of you. Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. Everybody knows Philippians 4:12. Got a free private screening to this movie the other day, and pretty sure, I know he did. He actually quotes this verse. Everybody knows that Philippians 4:12. But Philippians 4:13. Let me just think here a minute. It's 2:12. And they know 4:13 too. 2:12. Wherefore, my beloved, this is what everybody uses to get you off their back. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, verse 12. But look at verse 13. For it is God that worketh in you, both to will and to do his good pleasure. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. You know, as this coronavirus has come along and it's done the different things that it's doing, I have set my goals on seeing the positive things that are happening and telling myself I am not going to murmur over the difficulties that we or the inconveniences that we continually are involved in, because I see lots of stuff happening. I mean, you need to be reminded of this. Atheism is being shot down big time because it can't meet and have their rallies to remind themselves that they are God and there is no God, or whatever they do. Skeptics, humanists, agnostics, the whole bunch. They meet together in their different conventions. Didn't get to meet this year. Good. All the homosexuals that were supposed to have their 30-year anniversary down at Disney didn't get to meet this year. Good. Biggest evolutionary platform in the United States, the public school system, didn't get to start back up. Some of them didn't start at all. That's the biggest platform for evolution, and they didn't get to start up. Good. That's what needs to happen. More people need to start homeschooling so they can teach their children what they need to be taught, and they don't have to mix and mingle with some of the craziest individuals in town. So I'm saying it's not that hard. We homeschooled our kids, and it wasn't because of Corona. Those are good things. The church is big time being purged. What do you mean purged? You ever read John 15, 1 through 6? All these dead branches, all these individuals that are basically useless and have gone to all these alternative things that they would have never done and never put up with, they're now all doing things that they'll never be able to erase. It is on par, in my opinion, in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and they never came back. That crowd went off, and then they split again, became the disciples of Christ, and they're even more liberal. Women deacons, women pastors, the whole bit, welcoming homosexuals. That is happening to the church. And you might be saying, Johnny, you should be mourning over that. I'm not mourning over that. A bunch of these individuals need to go. They are individuals, as I just mentioned a moment ago, they are individuals that would have, when somebody does something, like Reuben, he's toast. He's not going to be in our story anymore. Somebody like Judah, he's toast. Excuse me, Judah in Genesis 49:10 ends up being the seed line for David, for Jesus, and you just toasted in it. Why? Because you make your judgment on one activity that a person or action that a person is involved in, rather than realizing that God is going to judge that person on the totality of his life, and you want to get rid of him based on one thing. And you might say, well, you're so perfect. You know, I've done enough of that myself, and I'm learning my lessons. I'm learning my lessons because it's being done to me. And it's a very hateful way to live, and most persons would never tell their problems, especially to preachers, because preachers are so vindictive and they're so hateful, and they will use these things, or they'll just basically say, you're toast. That's it for you. We'll never let you be. You're always going to have to sit on this back row or whatever, and you're marked Cain. You're like Cain, marked. Well, even God had mercy on Cain. All right, let's keep going. So here's my point about what is taking place right now. 22 years Joseph has been in Egypt. And Joseph has been a very accommodating individual, and Joseph has been a very discreet individual, and he has put into action a form of government that has made everything belong to Pharaoh, and it blessed the children of Israel in a tremendous way for 3 generations so that they could incubate into a huge nation that even the Pharaoh that was trying to kill the babies was afraid of because of their number. Now, 22 years. And notice what happens. Now, how is Joseph's heart? at this particular time. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. What's happening? They've come from Canaan. They know there's corn in Egypt. They certainly, everybody's heard of this prime minister that is in charge. They know they're going to have to go to some individual. That Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them. He said unto them, your spies come to see the nakedness of the land. Are you come? 22 years? Now, folks, I know that we do this. I do it. We often hold on to things that were done to us by some individual in our family, by some person in our hometown, or some person over here in some church 15, 20 years ago. You preachers, they fired you, and you spent the rest of your life trying to realizing that none of the things that people do to you can change your trajectory if you'll be discreet. Discretion delivers you from the evil man. Go forward, have your view broaden, and realize there are all kinds of things that you can do besides getting even. But 22 years, and so the reason I bring this up is because, look, we're looking at a very discreet man. We're looking at a very accommodative man. We're looking at a wonderful planner, but still, he's human. And as soon as he sees his brothers, he basically starts having problems, heart problems. He wants to do something to them rather than somehow or other be able to remove the thoughts that he's having. Well, we're going to see how those actually are changed. We're going to have to do this briefly, or we'll end up running out of time. Genesis 45:4. Now, I realize that I jumped from 42 to 45. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, therefore, be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that you sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve your life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years, in the which there shall be neither earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve your posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Now, can God do that to you? Can God put you in a position where you are so powerful for his cause? No. If you're going to continue, or I am going to continue to be the kind of person that lets this characterize me, and I'm going to spend all my time getting even and wearing people out that are doing things to me personally, and forgetting that God actually is in charge. In the very whole of this picture, God was actually doing all of this and managing it in such a way that he ends up being a father to Pharaoh. Can you imagine? I am a father to Pharaoh. That is comparable to somebody being in a position where the president, the one we have now, let's say Donald Trump, would actually be listening to you. He could realize that you have such ability, and your plans are such that it completely turns around everything for just and good. That's a very powerful individual, but a person who is here is not going to get there. Not if that's his overall thinking process. Well, what made the difference? How did he get from that to chapter 45? Well, let's notice. Now remember, we were talking about individuals that you would have made toast, that you would have removed them from the storyline. Let me stop just a minute. I know I brought some different water in here, and I don't know what I did with it. I had some, it was just warm, that's all. That's the only difference. This is good now because it's cooled off. I mean, it's warmed up. That cold water hits me in the back. Okay, what made the difference? All this is really important. What made the difference? Changes he saw in the men. You know, folks, you can get to hating on somebody, and you spend your entire life hating on that person, and you're not involved with them, and you have no idea what's happening in that person's life. Let me see if I can get this chair in the right direction so that I can get out of the picture a bit. You could be this way towards somebody, and that person isn't even the same person anymore. People repent all the time, and they change. And it may be that you don't get to be around them, you don't know anything about them, and you're still over here hating them, spending energy. Genesis 42:21, and they said one to another. Now, this is where we were a while ago. He said, you're spies. He recognizes them. They don't recognize him. And they say one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. Now he's fixing to learn something. Now, I'm not through studying the business about these brothers, their different nationalities, their relationships to these different women that actually helped raise them. Because I know there's all kinds of things that are useful from the standpoint of a comparison that somebody could read and help them to realize, you know what, I don't have it so bad. Or you could use it to show them, look, this is what you can do. And not only that, things can change. You never know. Circumstances change. We are having individuals that have been away from us in the Martinsville congregation, some for 10 plus years, returning, and just joyful relationship to have them back. Just this past Sunday, an individual came back that's been separated from us for quite some time, and we're praying for her husband also to be returned to us. Circumstances, is it Corona? I don't know. But I do know that Corona has caused a lot of people to have a lot of different ways of thinking, how fragile that you can be. And also, if you aren't aware of this, you need to be aware of it. There are people everywhere that actually have Corona and have tested positive, and they are continuing to do the best they can, and they are not necessarily quarantining in every respect. And you're around them, and you don't even know it. And so I know several, as a matter of fact, and I'm still well. Now, I came in this morning feeling terrible, but I'm still well, and we need to realize that God is blessing us, and we're not able to protect ourselves because there are many people, as I say, that actually have tested positive, don't have any symptoms, but they've tested positive, and they're all around us, and they just continue to go about their business because they're not going to quit work for 14 days and risk losing their job. You might say, that's awful. They're infecting people. Well, somebody infected them, and I'm not saying anything in regard to that. I'm just telling you, this is how it is. You need to keep your life in a good way with God. And so what made the difference with Joseph? What is it that made Joseph change his mind? It's things that he heard about individuals that actually a point in their life where it sounds to me like Joseph pretty much said they're toast. If I ever see them again, I'm going to start giving them a hard time. But as Joseph, because he is the prime minister and he speaks Egyptian and they're speaking in a different language, he is not letting himself be known. He gets to hear this. And Reuben answered them, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child? Now he finds out that Reuben, his eldest brother, by a different mother, was really planning on helping him get out of there. He was not at all involved in the slaying. Now, I don't know what Joseph was thinking, but I do know that Joseph was having more problems with Dan, Asher, Naphtali, and Gad because of the fact that they're children of the handmaids. They're different nationality. As I said, they could have been just like Ishmael. They could have been Babylonian or Chaldean. There's no telling what they could have been because they were not of the same seed line. So He knows that those individuals couldn't even speak peaceably unto him. We read that in Genesis 37. But now he's finding out his older brother said, didn't I say unto you, do not sin against the child, and you would not hear. Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. We're getting what we deserve. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter, and turned himself about from them, and he wept. Now, I haven't come to like a full understanding or a peaceable interpretation of this business here. I can see my lower third is in the way, but that's all right. That's verse 24. The end of it says, and he wept. I'm not sure exactly why he wept right here. You know, it could be the memory of the whole thing, but this isn't the point where he actually changes. There's just some things that start happening, some differences. Now, you move to Genesis 44, and they have gone home, and they basically have come back. Let me turn to Genesis 44. You might want to look at it yourself. I know hopefully you're taking notes, and you don't really have to worry about remembering this per se. Those of you who watch on YouTube, you know it's archived, and even if you don't watch it on YouTube and you're in the local area and you want to go back and go through this information so that you really package it in such a way that you know it, it'll be up on a playlist of Genesis classes on my YouTube. You just have to put in my name, Johnny Robertson, and it'll come up, and you can go back and you can listen to this in incremental spots, and or you can pull up incremental spots and then remind yourself of what's going on. So basically several different events have taken place, and we are now to the point where Joseph sent them back with their food that they bought, but he also sent them back with money in the mouth of their bags. When they get home, they find out that they all have their money. It scares them. They don't know what to think about it. And Joseph has asked them to bring their the smaller brother, the smallest of their brothers, and they have consistently told him that there is one son that is not. Now, I really don't think they're telling the truth when they say he is not. They know what happened to him, and they're not telling that they sold him into slavery. They're just simply saying that he is not. But they are telling that it would be terrible to their father because of the one that is not, which is Joseph. The grief that he suffered, it would be terrible for him if Benjamin was to come, and that's what Joseph was doing. He's concocting a plan in chapter 42 in which he gets Benjamin into Egypt, and he intends to keep Benjamin there as his younger brother. Then Judah came near unto him, and he said, O my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not thy anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servant, saying, Have you a father or a brother? And we said unto my Lord, We have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, a little one, and his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother, and his father loveth him. Well, as Judah begins to point out more details, as you might say, as the plot thickens and their plight becomes more difficult, these men are going through a very terrible trial. Just read it, or when you read it, you don't really think about it. It really doesn't come full circle to you. You know, the possibility of them being put in jail, they were put in jail already at first for 3 days. And Simeon was in fact left in Egypt while they went back and told their daddy the things that had happened. And they eventually are starving and they have to come back. And the whole thing is very stressful. They know they could go to jail because they've already been in jail, and Simeon is in bondage right now. And can you just imagine the anxiety that's going on with these men and their wives back at home and their children back at home? And this is not something that you just read and you don't stop and let the points resonate and make yourself get into this. And I don't think people do that. They just read through this, and it's not like it's not like when a person reads a novel and they allow the whole thing to just, you immerse yourself in a novel and you're seeing all the players and you're trying to get everything you can get out of it. And then later you see a movie and you say, oh no, reading it was so much better. The theater of the mind is so much better than what Hollywood can put out there. And I'd say the same thing about the movie that's out there. I'm reading the book. It's called A Blink of an Eye. The movie's called Brothers Crossing. The book is so much better than the movie. I don't even want to look at the people that are actors in the movie. I just assume make them up in my own mind. And then there are pictures of who these people are. But why don't we do the Bible that way? Why do we not get all the players? Why do we not figure out that Leah has a handmaiden that is nanny to those children? And they would have a certain relationship. And growing up, they would be very close. And then as they get older, they begin to realize the concept of who's an heir and who's not. And the idea of one of them being involved sexually with one of the others and just the different things. And there's more in here. We have skipped a lot of things that actually took place. And so we get to here and he says, we have a brother that is dead. Now, you just have to think about that from the standpoint of what Joseph was thinking as he thought for those 22 years. Now, one of the reasons that I brought out the business associated with Jacob actually getting all of the money from the land of Canaan and all the money from the land of Egypt, Jacob is an extremely powerful individual. And the parameters of his domain reach all the way down into Canaan. And the Bible told us a while ago that he gathered all the money out of both lands, Canaan and Egypt. You just have to ask yourself why he did not go around his family, why he didn't check on them, nothing. And you're really getting it here. There are a lot of things that Joseph doesn't know that was going on with his family members. He just simply knows they hated him enough to talk about killing him, and they threw him in a pit, and they didn't listen to a poor 17-year-old's pleas to whatever it is that I can do. I'll stop doing it. I'll quit acting like I'm acting. There's just no telling all the different things that Joseph was saying to try to get out of that pit. And it's just amazing. And so now he's actually learning that instead of his father just thinking that something happened to him and didn't come looking for him, his father thinks he's dead. Now, Joseph's heart can no longer hold a grudge. We're in 44 still, and Judah is talking. And thy servant my father said unto us, you know that my wife bare me 2 sons, and the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces. And I saw him not since. And if you take also this from me, and mischief befall him, you shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Now therefore, when I come to thy servant, my father, and the lad be not with us, seeing that his life is bound up in the lad's life, it shall come to pass when he seeth that the lad is not with us, he will die, and thy servant shall bring down the gray hairs of thy servant our father with sorrow to the grave. And thy servant became surety for the lad for thy servant became surety for the lad unto my father, saying, if I bring him not unto thee, then I shall bear the blame to my father forever. Now therefore I pray thee, let my servant abide instead of the lad a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. Now, here's what you've just seen. You have seen Judah, who actually is the one who said, let's sell him. Let's not kill him. He is our blood. Let's sell him. You have now seen him actually turn into a man who would in fact take the place of Joseph if the thing was all turned around and they realized what they had done to their father, the grief they had created for their father, and the guilt that they had had to live with. And, you know, when you do something to somebody, this is a great lesson, y'all. This is a great lesson to actually, all of us to realize that only a fool doesn't think that God is watching. When you do dastardly things to individuals, you mistreat them, you do awful things, you refuse mercy. Do you realize that when you refuse mercy, that the old saying, you cut off your own nose to spite your face? When you refuse mercy, you are actually cutting off the opportunity for yourself to have mercy. In James chapter 2, for he shall have judgment without mercy that hath showed no mercy, and mercy rejoiceth against judgment. Have you ever wondered why people treat you so bad? It could be because you were not merciful to another individual when you had the opportunity, and you're wondering why you just can't seem to get a break. You burned the bridge. You burned the mercy bridge. When you don't extend mercy to other individuals, then mercy is not extended to you. And so as we're reading this, you actually should be taking into account that there are two different things that can be happening here, two different things that are happening, and it's to different people. The individuals who did you wrong, it doesn't mean that their life becomes blessed and they got away with it. If they did you wrong and they weren't merciful to you and they mistreated you, do you not realize that the God of all the world, the God of the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that in them is, that God is watching? And if you're reading the Proverbs, you definitely get to hear God say that vengeance are going to belong to him. He's telling you not to be the kind of person that is trying to mete out these things. And Joseph could have checked to see what was going on. He could have sent a servant over there, any number of different things. But the problem is, he did not know that his daddy thought he was dead. Now, you might say, well, even if he wasn't dead, then why are you saying that this would affect Joseph's thinking process? Well, I tell you this, if you're watching Caleb's show on Wednesday, and you're studying the life of Christ, and you are in fact studying geography at the same time, you would know some distances. It is nothing from Hebron. That's where Joseph's father lives. It's one of the places that he stationed himself a lot. It is nothing from Hebron to Shechem and to Dothan. And why do I say that? Because Joseph traveled that as a 17-year-old. So the idea of him going out and looking as far as Dothan and trying to figure out what happened, I mean, the same people that found Joseph when he was wandering around in chapter 37 looking for his brothers and said, they've gone from Shechem to Dothan, it would be nothing for his father to be involved in such a search. He would know that his grandfather, upon losing Lot, his nephew, not even his favorite child, his nephew, actually went to war with individuals all the way up to Damascus. Have you seen how far it is from Hebron all the way up to Damascus? That's a tremendous amount of effort to get Lot and his goods and his family back. Now, why did his father not do that? Why was there no search? Why was there no follow-up? Surely they could have come into contact with some individuals in this traveling band of Ishmaelites back and forth and continued to check. You know what's going on? He does not know that his daddy thinks he's dead. And what we're saying is all kinds of things could be going on with individuals that you've crossed up with. They might not even be thinking about what you're thinking. And the last thing you need to do is spend your time dwelling on that and not realizing that God is working in his own way. And thy servant, my father, said unto us, know you that my wife bare me 2 sons, and one went out from me and said, I said, surely he is torn in pieces. And I saw him not since. And if you take this from me, mischief befall him. You shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. The sorrow that they had already seen their father deal with, they didn't want to have anything to do with that. And here's the man who actually said, let's sell him. Now he's saying, let me be the bondman. Let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. So the changes in these individuals, let's go back to our business about, well, Judah would be toast. Why did we say that? Genesis 38, he went into the harlot. Well, he's out. He's out of this narrative. He no longer is of any use to God. And Reuben, he's out. He's no longer of any use to God. Now, wait a minute. Isn't it the fact that both Judah and Reuben were doing good things as well? Is it the case in the Christianity that you occupy, that you practice, that the good things that a person is doing and the possible good things that they can do later are not to be considered? You just basically are ready to toast them upon some infraction that takes place? Because at the same time that we're basically talking about this, Judah has saved the boy's life. Reuben wanted to return him to their father. So you've got the person that you would have toasted over here in chapter 35 for being with Bilhah. He's gone, he's toast. The person that you toasted over there, he actually is saving the boy's life in chapter 37. Well, in chapter 38, I don't know what the timeline is for Judah in chapter 38. I'm saying this is an extended timeline. He has a wife himself. Now, this is Judah going into Tamar, his daughter-in-law. So you have to look at the timeline. It's just inserted, but it doesn't all happen in chapter 38. Judah didn't have a wife. He marries an Adullamite's wife. Well, she has a child, She has another child, Onan. She has another child that's much younger, Shelah. One of them, dies. Onan dies. And then he promises that when Shelah comes to age, that he will give her to Tamar. Well, he's of age now. So you see the timeline? There's a tremendous amount of time. And this is just inserted in chapter 38 and doesn't mean it is chronological. But if you toasted him back there in whatever time frame that was when he and Tamar came into contact, he would not be in a position to be right here pleading and putting himself in the position of saying, look, I'll become a servant to save our younger son. He's trying to make up for the things that he did, his behavior in regard to Joseph. See, this is us getting to see the totality of what God sees and the judgment, the means of judgment that God will actually use. God will use the totality of our lives, the behaviors that we have, the mercy that we've extended, the things that we've done that are good. He will actually measure those in a way that we absolutely cannot measure. We cannot fathom these things. But I tell you this, we could get better at it. We could get better at being a man after God's own heart. We could get better at acting like David did when Saul actually died. David was very grieved at the death of Saul, who was his friend, who had become envious and let just all kinds of things take over in his mind. He was extremely grieved and still continued to say good things about Saul. Well, guess what? That is a merciful individual. Well, is it the case that David needed mercy later? I think so. In 2 Samuel chapter 12, when he ends up becoming a murderer himself and takes the wife of another man, he needs mercy. And when he is confronted, what does he get? He gets mercy. Why? Because that's the kind of man that he was. Now, here's the question. When we really look at this, if you go down through this list of things that these individuals were involved in, they were actually involved in attempted murder at one point. I'm for sure that I don't know what Simeon and Levi were doing when they put Joseph in the pit. But I know that Gad, Asher, Dan, and Naphtali, they were relatives in a different way, half nationality. They couldn't even speak peaceably to Joseph. I don't know what Levi and Simeon are doing. There's nothing being said about them at that particular time, but I do know what Reuben and I do know what Judah were doing. They were both trying in some way to deliver Joseph to a certain degree so that killing him did not become an option. But some of them are actually guilty of kidnapping. I guess they're going to all be guilty of men stealing, allowing it to take place. Reuben wasn't there when it took place. He came back later and found that they had done this. They're guilty of attempted murder. They're guilty of the treatment of Joseph, the way that they treated him initially, whether they planned to get him out of the pit or not. That's not throwing him in the pit and just making him think that that's where he's going to remain and some wild animal could kill him or whatever. That's not good stuff. And so, you see what we're saying here? And now this individual has turned into a totally different person. And we're in a position to see God's plan fully unfold. Genesis 45:7. This is really the context where Joseph ends up now seeing that things have come full circle and what the dreams meant. God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Now that's 45, okay? That's Genesis 45. But let's look at Genesis chapter 50. That's 45. Jacob has not gotten to Egypt yet. In Genesis 50, verse 1, and Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. Egyptians mourned for him. And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, If now I found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die in my grave, which I have digged me in the land of Canaan, there thou shalt bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. Pharaoh said, Go up and bury thy father, according as he made thee to swear. Joseph went up to bury his father, and he went up all the land of the servants, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. You see the tremendous power and the favor that this man has garnered in Egypt. And all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house, and only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with them both chariots and horsemen, and it was a great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Adad, which is beyond Jordan, and there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation, and made mourning for his father 7 more days. It's like we got 90 days of mourning in here plus 7, or 60 days plus 7. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Adad, they said, This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians, wherefore the name of it is called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan, buried him in a cave, field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought, with the field for his possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned to Egypt. Now, this is a very, very important point. Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father. But when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, when they saw that their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us of all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a message unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall you say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren, and their sin. For they did unto thee evil, and now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. Forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him, and he said, and his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and he said, We be thy servants. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? Here is a very great passage, and it is really apropos for us to end on this thought today. But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear you not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them, and he spake kindly unto them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And he saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, and also Machir the son of Manasseh were brought up on his knees. So we have just developed that Joseph was able to live long enough to see 3 generations. They were only there 4 generations. And that last generation is when we'll open up in Exodus. That last generation is a time frame where a king, a Pharaoh, arose that did not know the God of Joseph. Now, y'all, this is a tremendous account. And notice that these individuals are still worried about the things done by them to Joseph. You know, we really need to practice being more forgiving. We need to practice and realize that God isn't judging matters the way we judge. And this is in no way a plea for us to say, well, liberty is going to create license. And I know that we all know, some of you may not know this, but we know that that is something that was actually said in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. And so when we are talking about liberty, liberty is not a license. Liberty is something that we really should cherish. And I want to bring us back to Galatians 4:1 now. And you may have thought that I just totally forgot that. When we were talking about those children all being children and growing up together, now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all, but is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son, and if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. You know, I really don't think often we act like that we're bondmen. And the reason I say that is because bondmen don't have a level of freedom, and they don't appreciate the position of being a child and having the mercy of a father and the grace that continues to be dispensed by a father. And so when you don't have that, when you're a bondman, and kind of like the 4 sons of the bond women, and Joseph is reporting evil on them, and they in turn hate Joseph. There's something about the difference, and this is what's being played out here. There's something about the difference in the heart of a person who realizes that you have been accepted as a son and a daughter of God, and the realization of the favor, which is grace, and the mercy that is being extended to you. Now, you might say, well, how do I actually get that? Well, what I'm saying is that's something that we have to meditate upon too. In Galatians chapter 3, in verse 25, but after the faith is come, we are no longer under the schoolmaster. Now that's the Galatians 1, the tutor. We're no longer under the schoolmaster. We now are children of God by faith in Christ Jesus. Now, a child of God should be able to take these lessons that we're looking at and look at how they play out, read the narratives and see the events play out, and see how that God is working things out. And we should trust that that favor for a son and a daughter is there, and that mercy that a father and a mother extend to a daughter and a son, it's everlasting. It's not something that is jerked away when you make this one incident or you mess up in this one particular setting. Notice this, for as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. Now, first it said, for we are all the children of God by faith in Jesus Christ. As many as you've been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. And now there is neither Jew nor Greek, nor bond nor free. There's neither male nor female, for we're all one in Christ Jesus. And if you be Christ, then you're Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. We're all heirs together. There is no reason for us to try to be Xing each other out and having these feelings of animosity, and also not realizing that when you're doing these evil deeds to each other, you're also creating problems for yourself. You're going to have a part of you that knows that you have misbehaved and you've done something wrong to somebody who is one of your fellow brothers or your sisters, and God is watching all of this, and you're dealing with things in your mind that you shouldn't even be dealing with. You should be letting that go. And if you're the person who is suffering from something that someone did to you, you're also going to be having that stuff going on in your head, and you should be able to learn from our lesson in Genesis that God is able to use you in such a way, if you'll get past all that stuff and keep your eyes focused, like Joseph fully sees God's plan now. He actually realizes that God sent him to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. You know what he has in mind? He has in mind what all of them know. And you might say, how do you know what Joseph has in his mind? Joseph said, do not leave my bones here. Well, what are you talking about? Joseph knew that in one more generation, they were going to be delivered. They were going to be able to come out of Egypt, and they were going back to the promised land. Now, the people who are reading this, the people who are hearing this narrated, they are individuals who are actually getting a lesson that should encourage them to realize that if God could sustain all of this from the time that he made this promise in Genesis 15 about them going into this captivity, if God was able to sustain them all through these horrendous difficulties, the raping of Dinah and the destroying of the individuals, the Shechemites, and the fear that came upon the land after that, the different things that God helped Jacob get through. Just for instance, it would be a good study for everybody to go back to Genesis 34. And I know that we didn't just pass over this in a quick way, but we didn't really get into it. You remember as he was going out, as Jacob was going out, he saw in Genesis 28, he saw the ladder with the angels descending and ascending back and forth. But when he comes back into the land, Genesis 32, and Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is the God of hosts. And he called the name of that place, Mahanaim. I don't know exactly what that means. I do know this, though. I know that the Bible actually talks about, and this may be something that you don't believe, you just take that up with your own Bible and argue with yourself, because I'm not going to argue with you about it. When God is talking about who is the greatest in the kingdom in Matthew 18, or when Jesus is, or the people are, they want to know who's the greatest. And Jesus set the little children in their midst and said, except you humble yourself and become as a little child, shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as a little child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso also receive such little child in my name receiveth me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, It were better for a millstone be hanged about his neck, that he were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it is need be that offenses will come, but woe to that man by whom they come. Wherefore, if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off and cast them from thee, for it is better to enter in halt or maim rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast in everlasting fire. Now, take heed that you despise, not think small or of nothing, not despise one of these little ones. For I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of God, which is in heaven. You may not believe that. You may not believe that heaven's attention is actually directed towards you if you are a humble individual. He's not talking about little children here. He's talking about people who have determined to become humble as a little child. And he is also warning individuals that if they hurt one of these individuals, do you not realize that their angel is before the face of God? He beholds the face of my Father which is in heaven. Now, a lot of people are just saying, I don't know about that. Well, I don't hear you having a problem saying that the angels are rejoicing in heaven at the repentance of one individual. So they're being attentive to some individual that is repenting. So why is it the case that you can't believe this particular element when it's in the basically same context? Folks, really do appreciate you being with us. This has been a 2-hour broadcast of the book of Genesis, and we basically finished it up today. And we want to make sure that you know that it is on YouTube, and you can access that by simply typing in my name, Johnny Robertson, and going to the playlist and looking up the Genesis class. God bless you. Have a good afternoon. Always ask for what does the Bible say?